I watch in stunned silence as Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, holds up the wedding dress I spent 3 sleepless nights creating by hand. "A dress for poor people," she shrieks, her voice dripping with disgust. Without hesitation, she hurls the delicate ivory silk into the kitchen garbage bin, crushing months of careful beadwork under coffee grounds and banana peels. My heart fractures as I stare at the destroyed gown. 27 years of couture experience, countless hours of intricate embroidery, reduced to trash. But Jennifer has no idea what she just threw away or who she just crossed. My name is Trina Williams, and at 64 years old, I never imagined I would find myself standing in my daughter-in-law's pristine kitchen, watching her destroy something I poured my soul into creating. I live in my modest 2-bedroom house in suburban Cincinnati, Ohio, surrounded by the tools and memories of a career that once brought me incredible pride and recognition. For 30 years, I served as head seamstress at Bergman & Associates, a high-end bridal boutique that catered to socialites, celebrities, and anyone who could afford to spend $15,000 on a wedding dress. I worked alongside master craftsmen from Europe, learning techniques passed down through generations of couturiers. My hands shaped silk that would grace red carpets, altar steps, and magazine covers. Every stitch I placed carried the weight of perfection, and I delivered it without fail. 5 years ago, arthritis forced me into retirement. The constant pain in my knuckles made the delicate work increasingly difficult, though my skill remained as sharp as ever. I thought those days of creating breathtaking gowns were behind me forever, until my son Marcus announced his engagement to Jennifer. Marcus, my 31-year-old son, works as an insurance adjuster here in Cincinnati. He inherited his father's practical nature and my attention to detail, though he applies those traits to damage assessments rather than fabric manipulation. When he met Jennifer 2 years ago, I genuinely wanted to welcome her into our small family. After losing my husband to cancer 6 years ago, Marcus was all I had left, and I desperately wanted to love whoever made him happy. Jennifer claimed to come from a wealthy East Coast family, constantly referencing her parents' estate and their extensive family connections. She spoke with affected precision, dropping names of places and people that meant nothing to me but seemed designed to impress. During family dinners, she would mention charity galas, country clubs, and exclusive social events, as if they were routine parts of her upbringing. From the beginning, Jennifer treated me with thinly veiled condescension. She would comment on my quaint little house, my simple lifestyle, and make subtle suggestions about how Marcus was finally moving up in the world. She had a particular talent for delivering insults wrapped in what sounded like compliments, leaving me uncertain whether I should feel hurt or grateful. Marcus seemed completely oblivious to the tension brewing between his mother and wife. Caught between loyalty to both women, he would laugh nervously when Jennifer made her pointed remarks, clearly hoping the friction would resolve itself without his intervention. I bit my tongue repeatedly, not wanting to force him to choose sides or create conflict in his new marriage. 3 months before the wedding, Jennifer was complaining about the outrageous cost of designer wedding dresses during one of our family dinners. She had visited several high-end boutiques and was shocked to discover that the gowns she admired cost anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000. That was when I made what I thought was a generous offer. "I could make your dress," I suggested quietly, setting down my coffee cup. "I have experience with bridal couture, and I would love to create something special for you." Jennifer initially dismissed the idea with a wave of her manicured hand. "Oh, that's sweet, Trina, but I was thinking more along the lines of something professional. You know, from an actual designer." The words stung, but I persisted. "Let me show you some sketches and fabric samples. I think you might be surprised by what I can create." Eventually, Jennifer agreed to look at my portfolio, though I suspected her decision was motivated more by the potential savings than any confidence in my abilities. When I showed her the photographs of gowns I had created over the years, including several that had been featured in bridal magazines, her attitude shifted slightly. She began asking questions about techniques and timelines, though she continued to make subtle digs about homemade versus professional work. "I suppose if you really think you can make something that doesn't look obviously amateur," she said, examining a photo of a beaded silk creation I had made for a governor's daughter, "then perhaps we could try this arrangement." but I would need it to look absolutely perfect. No one at the wedding can know it wasn't made by a real couturier. I assured her that the dress would meet any professional standard, and we began discussing her vision for the gown. She wanted something elegant and sophisticated, with intricate beadwork and a dramatic train. As she described her dream dress, I could already see it taking shape in my mind, visualizing how each element would come together to create something truly spectacular. After Jennifer left that evening, I was cleaning up my sewing room when I noticed a piece of paper on the floor near where she had been sitting. It must have fallen from her purse during our discussion. I picked it up, intending to call and let her know she had dropped something, but the letterhead caught my attention immediately. It was a past due notice for Jennifer's student loans, showing a balance of over $40,000 and threatening additional penalties if payment was not received within 10 days. The document revealed that Jennifer owed a total of $87,000 in educational debt, far more than most people accumulate even with graduate degrees. I stared at the paper, my mind racing. Jennifer had never mentioned college debt or financial struggles. In fact, she consistently portrayed herself as someone who had never worried about money, whose family had always provided everything she needed. This single document contradicted everything she had told us about her background and financial situation. Standing there in my sewing room, holding evidence of Jennifer's deception, I felt a mixture of confusion and sympathy. If she was struggling financially, why not simply admit it? Why create such an elaborate facade of wealth and privilege? And more importantly, did my son know the truth about the woman he was planning to marry? The student loan document haunted me for days. I found myself wondering what other aspects of Jennifer's carefully constructed image might be false. Against my better judgment, I decided to conduct some discreet research into her background. Using the address on the debt notice, I was able to trace Jennifer's actual family history. What I discovered shocked me completely. Jennifer had grown up in Newark, New Jersey, in a working-class neighborhood. Her father, Robert Sawyer, worked the night shift at an automotive parts factory. Her mother, Linda, cleaned offices part-time for a janitorial service. They lived in a small apartment above a convenience store, and according to public records, they had been struggling financially for years. The prestigious East Coast family Jennifer claimed as her own was entirely fictional. She had borrowed the identity and background of a real prominent family, the Fairmonts of Newport, and was using their history as her own. The charity galas and exclusive events she referenced were real, but she had never attended them. Everything was an elaborate lie constructed from internet research and social media posts. I also discovered that Jennifer had accumulated her massive debt by attending an expensive private college and pursuing a graduate degree in marketing. She had used student loans to fund not just her education, but an artificially elevated lifestyle during her college years. She had been living on borrowed money for nearly a decade, using credit cards to maintain appearances while her actual financial situation deteriorated. The revelation should have filled me with anger or righteous indignation, but instead, I felt a profound sadness. I recognized the desperation behind Jennifer's deception, the crushing pressure she must feel to maintain her facade. At the same time, I worried about my son, who had no idea he was about to marry someone carrying such enormous debt and living such a fundamental lie. Despite this knowledge, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would create the most beautiful wedding dress possible for Jennifer. Not because she deserved it, but because the act of creation itself had always been my way of processing difficult emotions and complex situations. I would pour my skills, my experience, and my heart into making something truly extraordinary. I used a significant portion of my retirement savings to purchase the finest materials available. The base fabric was Italian silk, so pure and smooth it felt like liquid in my hands. The lace came from a centuries-old workshop in France, where craftsmen still used techniques developed during the Renaissance. The beads were Austrian crystals, each one individually selected for its clarity and brilliance. The design I created was ambitious beyond anything I had attempted in my professional career. The bodice featured a complex pattern of hand-sewn pearls arranged in flowing vine motifs that seemed to grow organically across the silk. Each pearl was secured with tiny, invisible stitches that took nearly an hour to complete properly. The sleeves were constructed from layers of the French lace, creating an effect that was both delicate and dramatic. The skirt required over 40 yards of silk, carefully gathered and shaped to create a silhouette that would complement Jennifer's figure perfectly. The train extended 6 feet behind the dress, decorated with scattered crystal accents that would catch the light as she moved. Every seam was finished by hand using techniques I had learned from European masters, ensuring that the inside of the dress was as beautiful as the outside. I worked 16-hour days on the project, often starting before dawn and continuing until my arthritic hands forced me to stop. The pain was significant, but I pushed through it, driven by a perfectionism that had defined my entire career. I hand-sewed over 3,000 individual pearls, each one placed with mathematical precision to create patterns that would complement the dress' overall design. During the construction process, Marcus visited several times to check on my progress. He was amazed by the level of craftsmanship he witnessed, often sitting quietly in my sewing room as I worked, watching techniques he remembered from his childhood when I had made his Halloween costumes and prom outfits. "Mom, this is incredible," he said one evening, examining the nearly completed bodice. "I had no idea you could create something this sophisticated. Jennifer is going to be absolutely stunned." I smiled and continued my work, not sharing what I had learned about his fiancée's true background. Part of me hoped that creating something beautiful for her might somehow bridge the gap between us, that the act of generosity might inspire her to be more honest, both with herself and with my son. "I remember when you made my tuxedo for junior prom," Marcus continued, his voice filled with nostalgic warmth. "All my friends were so jealous because mine fit perfectly while theirs looked like potato sacks. You have this amazing gift, and I am so grateful you are using it for Jennifer." His gratitude made my chest tight with emotion. Marcus had always been proud of my work, even as a child when other kids teased him about having a seamstress for a mother. He understood the skill and artistry involved in high-end tailoring, and his appreciation had sustained me through many difficult periods in my career. As I neared completion of the dress, I calculated that its retail value would easily exceed $15,000. The materials alone cost nearly $3,000, and the labor involved represented hundreds of hours of expert craftsmanship. Any boutique would have charged premium prices for such a creation, and customers would have waited months to receive it. I was putting the finishing touches on the pearl work when my phone rang. The caller identified himself as James Morrison, assistant to celebrity stylist Patricia Hamilton. Patricia had been searching for my work after seeing a dress I had created 5 years earlier, featured in a fashion museum exhibition in New York. "Miss Williams, we have a rather unusual request," James explained. "One of our clients, actress Sarah Chen, will be attending the Met Gala next month, and she specifically requested that you design her gown. She saw photographs of your work at the museum and was incredibly impressed by the technical execution." I nearly dropped the phone. The Met Gala was one of the most prestigious fashion events in the world, attended by celebrities, designers, and cultural figures. Having one of my creations featured there would be the pinnacle of my career, even in retirement. "The compensation would be $50,000, James continued, "plus all materials and a full credit in the fashion coverage. We would need an answer within a week, as the timeline is quite tight." I hung up the phone and stared at Jennifer's nearly completed wedding dress. Here I was, creating a masterpiece for someone who had shown me nothing but contempt, while the opportunity of a lifetime waited for my response. The irony was almost overwhelming. The day I planned to present the completed dress to Jennifer, I arrived at her and Marcus' apartment carrying what I knew was the finest creation of my entire career. The gown hung in a special garment bag I had reserved for my most precious pieces, protected by layers of tissue paper and covered with a pristine white sheet. I had called ahead to arrange the appointment, and Jennifer had suggested I come while some of her friends were visiting. "They would love to see the dress," she had said over the phone, her tone suggesting she was looking forward to showing off what her mother-in-law had created. When I arrived, I found Jennifer entertaining 3 women in her perfectly appointed living room. Like Jennifer, they all dressed expensively and spoke with affected sophistication. They introduced themselves as Blair, Courtney, and Madison, names that seemed carefully chosen to suggest privilege and refinement. Their conversation revolved around upcoming social events, exotic vacation plans, and designer purchases. "Trina, thank goodness you are here," Jennifer announced as I entered. "I have been telling everyone about the dress you made. They are dying to see it." I carefully removed the garment from its protective covering, holding it up so that the afternoon light streaming through the windows could illuminate the intricate beadwork. The pearls caught the sunlight and scattered it in tiny rainbows across the silk, while the French lace sleeves seemed to float like gossamer. Even I was struck by how beautiful the finished piece had turned out. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. Blair, Courtney, and Madison leaned forward to examine the dress more closely, their expressions showing genuine amazement at the level of craftsmanship they were witnessing. "My goodness," Blair whispered, reaching out to touch one of the pearl-encrusted vines that flowed across the bodice. "This beadwork is extraordinary. How long did this take to complete?" "The hand sewing alone required nearly 200 hours," I explained, pride evident in my voice. "Each pearl is individually secured, and the pattern was designed to complement the dress silhouette perfectly. I have never seen anything like this outside of a museum," Courtney added, examining the intricate lace sleeves. "This technique is incredibly advanced. Where did you learn to do work of this caliber?" I began to explain my background at Bergman & Associates, describing some of the notable clients whose gowns I had created over the years. The women listened with growing interest, asking questions about various techniques and clearly impressed by my experience and expertise. That was when Jennifer decided to change the tone of the entire interaction. "Well, it is certainly ambitious," she said, her voice taking on a dismissive edge that I recognized immediately. "Though it is obviously homemade. You can always tell the difference between professional couture and amateur attempts, no matter how much effort goes into them." The shift in the room was immediate and uncomfortable. Jennifer's friends, who had been genuinely admiring the dress moments earlier, suddenly began nodding in agreement with her assessment. "Oh yes, absolutely," Madison said, though her tone suggested uncertainty. "Professional work has a certain polish that is difficult to replicate." "Exactly," Jennifer continued, warming to her theme. "This is the kind of thing poor people would wear when they are trying to look fancy, but do not have the money for real designer clothing. It is sweet that you tried, Trina, but honestly, I would be embarrassed to wear something so obviously amateur to my wedding." She walked over to where I was holding the dress and examined it with exaggerated disappointment, shaking her head sadly as if I had failed to meet some clearly established standard. "My friends will immediately recognize that this is homemade," she declared. "They will know I could not afford a real designer, and that would reflect poorly on Marcus and his prospects. I think you should stick to simple alterations instead of trying to compete with actual couturiers." Without warning, Jennifer grabbed the dress from my hands and walked directly to the kitchen. I followed, confused and increasingly alarmed by her behavior. She opened the garbage bin and, without hesitation, thrust the entire gown inside, crushing the delicate silk against coffee grounds and banana peels. "There," she announced, brushing her hands together as if she had just disposed of actual trash. "Now we can focus on finding something appropriate from a real designer." Her friends, who had followed us into the kitchen, began laughing and expressing agreement with Jennifer's decision. Blair mentioned a boutique in New York where Jennifer could find something more suitable. Courtney suggested that homemade clothing was fine for some occasions, but certainly not for a wedding. Madison nodded enthusiastically and added that professional standards really do make all the difference. I stood there in shocked silence, staring at months of work destroyed in an instant. The dress that had represented the pinnacle of my technical ability, that would have cost $15,000 in any high-end boutique, was now buried under kitchen waste and treated as if it had no value whatsoever. "You are digging through trash now?" Jennifer asked mockingly as I reached into the garbage bin to retrieve the damaged gown. "I suppose that is appropriate, considering what you brought me." I carefully pulled the dress from the refuse, coffee grounds clinging to the pearls and banana peels staining the pristine silk. My hands trembled as I tried to assess the damage, though I maintained my composure despite the humiliation burning in my chest. Jennifer had specifically timed this appointment to occur while Marcus was at work, ensuring that he would not witness her cruel treatment of both his mother and the gift I had labored to create for her. This had been a calculated humiliation, planned and executed with deliberate malice. I left the apartment without saying a word, clutching the damaged dress and walking to my car with as much dignity as I could muster. Jennifer and her friends continued their laughter behind me, their voices carrying through the open door as they discussed plans for shopping for a real wedding dress. During the drive home, I felt a combination of devastation and rage that I had not experienced since my husband's death. The physical pain of my arthritis seemed insignificant compared to the emotional ache of having my best work, my genuine gesture of love and inclusion, treated as worthless garbage. At home, I spread the dress across my dining room table and began the careful process of cleaning coffee grounds from the individual pearls. The silk could be restored, and most of the beadwork had survived intact, but the emotional damage felt irreparable. As I worked to repair the physical damage Jennifer had inflicted, my phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was Catherine Blackwell, a socialite whose wedding dress I had created 10 years earlier. Catherine had become something of a friend over the years, occasionally reaching out to share news or ask for recommendations. Her message read, "Trina, I hope you do not mind me reaching out, but I saw some concerning social media posts and thought you should know. Someone named Jennifer is claiming to be related to the Fairmont family of Newport. I know the real Fairmonts personally, and they are aware of this impersonation. They are considering legal action for identity fraud. I thought you might want to be aware, given that this seems to be connected to your family." I stared at the message, my understanding of Jennifer's deception expanding even further. Not only had she lied about her background and financial situation, but she was actively committing identity theft, using the Fairmont name to enhance her credibility and social standing. The real Fairmont family, prominent philanthropists and business leaders, had apparently discovered Jennifer's impersonation and were prepared to take legal action. Jennifer had not simply told harmless lies about her background. She had committed actual crimes that could result in serious legal consequences. As I continued cleaning banana peels from the pearls that had taken me weeks to sew, I realized that Jennifer had created a web of deception far more complex and dangerous than I had initially understood. My son was about to marry someone who was not only financially dishonest, but potentially facing criminal charges for fraud. Catherine Blackwell called me the following morning, her voice filled with concern and urgency. As one of Cincinnati's most prominent socialites and a longtime client, Catherine had always treated me with respect and genuine warmth. Her call was not entirely unexpected after the text message she had sent the previous evening. "Trina, I hope I am not overstepping boundaries," she began, but I felt compelled to reach out after discovering some very troubling information about this Jennifer person who is apparently marrying into your family. Catherine explained that she had first noticed Jennifer's social media accounts several months ago when mutual acquaintances began sharing photos from events where Jennifer claimed to be representing the Fairmont family interests. Initially, Catherine had assumed that Jennifer might be a distant relative or family friend, but something about her posts seemed inconsistent with what Catherine knew about the family's actual activities and preferences. "I know Harrison and Elizabeth Fairmont quite well," Catherine continued. "We serve on several charity boards together, and our families have been friends for decades. When I mentioned these posts to Elizabeth, she was completely baffled. She had never heard of anyone named Jennifer claiming family connections. The real Fairmont family had hired a private investigator to trace the source of the false claims. What they discovered was a systematic pattern of identity theft that extended far beyond simple name-dropping. Jennifer had been using their family history, their charitable affiliations, and even their personal photographs to construct her false identity. The investigator found that she has been using the Fairmont name to gain access to exclusive events, charity functions, and even potential business opportunities. Catherine explained. She has been representing herself as a family member in contexts where that connection could provide financial or social advantages. The legal implications were serious. Identity theft and fraud charges could result in significant fines and even jail time. The Fairmont family was understandably outraged that their reputation was being exploited by someone they had never met, and they were prepared to pursue the matter aggressively through both civil and criminal courts. "I thought you should know," Catherine concluded, "because this young woman is apparently about to become your daughter-in-law, and the legal consequences could potentially affect your son as well." After ending the call with Catherine, I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the pieces of the wedding dress I was still trying to restore, and contemplated the full scope of the situation my son was unknowingly entering. Jennifer's deception was not simply a matter of personal insecurity or social climbing. It represented a pattern of criminal behavior that could have devastating consequences for everyone involved. I decided to investigate further on my own, using the information Catherine had provided to piece together a more complete picture of Jennifer's actual background and current circumstances. What I discovered was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Jennifer's real family, the Sawyers of Newark, were genuinely struggling financially. Her father Robert had been working double shifts at the factory for years, trying to keep up with mounting medical bills from his wife's diabetes treatment. Linda Sawyer's part-time cleaning job provided minimal income, but it was all she could manage given her health condition. The family home, a modest apartment that had been their residence for over 15 years, was currently in foreclosure proceedings. They owed nearly $8,000 in back rent and were facing eviction within the month. According to public records, they had received multiple notices from the landlord and were desperately trying to find resources to avoid becoming homeless. The tragic irony was that Jennifer's parents had no idea about their daughter's elaborate deception or expensive lifestyle. They believed that Jennifer was successful and financially stable, working in marketing and living comfortably with her fiancé. They had been too proud to ask for help from their daughter, assuming that she was focused on building her own life and career. Meanwhile, I also learned more about the Hollywood opportunity that had been offered to me. James Morrison called again, explaining that actress Sarah Chen was becoming increasingly excited about the possibility of working with me for the Met Gala. Sarah had seen additional photographs of my work and was convinced that my aesthetic would be perfect for the theme of the upcoming event. "She is prepared to increase the offer to $70,000, James explained, plus a complete credit package that would include mentions in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and several other major publications. This could be transformative for your career, even in retirement." The opportunity represented everything I had worked toward during my professional life: recognition, financial reward, and the chance to see my work featured at the most prestigious fashion event in the world. It was also a chance to rebuild my professional reputation and potentially open doors to future commissions. However, accepting the offer would require me to begin work immediately, dedicating all of my time and energy to creating something worthy of the Met Gala. I would have to set aside my concerns about Jennifer and focus entirely on my own career prospects. While I was wrestling with this decision, I received a call from Marcus. His voice sounded strained and worried, suggesting that something was troubling him beyond the normal stress of wedding planning. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," he said. "I have been going over our finances to prepare for the honeymoon, and I found some things that do not make sense. Money has been disappearing from my savings account, and there are charges on my credit cards that I do not remember making." My heart sank as I realized that Jennifer had already begun using Marcus' financial resources to fund her lifestyle and possibly to service her existing debt. The pattern of deception was expanding to include theft from my son, adding another layer of urgency to an already complex situation. "Can you come over this evening?" Marcus asked. "I would like your advice about how to handle this, and I do not want to discuss it at home where Jennifer might overhear." I agreed to meet with Marcus, knowing that the conversation would force me to reveal what I had learned about his fiancée's true background. The decision to speak up had been made for me. I could no longer protect Jennifer's secrets when they were actively harming my son. That afternoon, while continuing to clean and repair the wedding dress, I made another discovery that changed everything once again. Catherine called to update me on the Fairmont family's investigation, and what she shared was both shocking and heartbreaking. The private investigator traced some of Jennifer's financial transactions, Catherine explained. "It appears that her real parents are facing foreclosure on their home. They owe several months of rent and are about to be evicted. The investigator believes that Jennifer is unaware of their situation, as she has had minimal contact with them over the past 2 years. I realized that Jennifer's elaborate deception had created a barrier between her and the family members who actually needed her help. While she was living beyond her means and stealing from my son to maintain her facade, her parents were facing homelessness because they were too proud to ask for assistance from a daughter they believed was successful. The situation presented me with an unexpected moral dilemma. I could expose Jennifer's lies and protect my son from further financial harm, but doing so might also prevent her parents from receiving help they desperately needed. Alternatively, I could find a way to help the Sawyer family while still addressing Jennifer's deceptive behavior. Standing in my sewing room, surrounded by the tools and materials of my trade, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I would not choose between revenge and compassion. Instead, I would find a way to achieve justice, while also protecting the innocent people caught in Jennifer's web of lies. That evening, when Marcus arrived at my house, I could see the stress etched across his face. My son had inherited his father's methodical nature, and discovering unexplained financial discrepancies had clearly shaken his trust in what he thought he understood about his life and upcoming marriage. "Mom, I found over $4,000 in charges that I never authorized," he said, settling into the kitchen chair where he had sat for countless conversations throughout his childhood. Expensive restaurants, clothing purchases, even a weekend trip to Nashville that I never took. When I asked Jennifer about them, she claimed they were surprise purchases for the wedding, but she could not provide any receipts or explanations. I poured him coffee and sat across from him, preparing to share information that would fundamentally alter his understanding of the woman he planned to marry. However, before revealing Jennifer's deception, I needed to understand the full extent of the financial damage she had already caused. "How much access does Jennifer have to your accounts?" I asked carefully. "She has cards for both my checking and savings accounts," Marcus admitted. "She said it would be easier for wedding planning if she could handle expenses without having to ask me for money every time." I thought I was being helpful and trusting. The situation was worse than I had feared. Jennifer had complete access to Marcus' finances and had been systematically draining his resources for months. The $4,000 he had discovered was likely only a fraction of what she had actually taken. "Marcus, there are some things about Jennifer that you need to know," I said gently. "I have been reluctant to share this information because I hoped she might be honest with you herself, but her behavior yesterday convinced me that she has no intention of telling the truth." I began by showing him the student loan document that had fallen from Jennifer's purse months earlier. His face grew pale as he processed the magnitude of the debt she had concealed from him. $87,000, he whispered. "She told me she had no student loans because her family paid for her education." Next, I shared what I had learned about her real background: the identity theft involving the Fairmont family, and the potential legal consequences she was facing. With each revelation, Marcus' expression grew more stunned and hurt. Everything she told me about her family, her background, her education, it was all lies, he asked, his voice barely audible. "I believe she created this elaborate deception because she felt ashamed of her real circumstances," I explained. "But Marcus, her parents are facing foreclosure right now, and they have no idea that she is living this artificial lifestyle or that she has been stealing from you to maintain it." I handed him the information Catherine had provided about the Sawyer family's financial crisis. Marcus read through the documents with growing disbelief, learning that his future in-laws were working-class people struggling to keep their home, not the wealthy socialites Jennifer had described. "What am I supposed to do with this?" Marcus asked. "The wedding is in 3 days. All the guests have been invited. The venue is booked, and I have been planning my entire future around someone who apparently does not even exist." I reached across the table and took his hands in mine, feeling the same protective instincts that had guided me through his childhood, scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. "You have time to make the right decision," I said, "but you deserve to know the truth about everything before you make any permanent commitments." After Marcus left that evening, I spent hours developing a plan that would address multiple aspects of this complex situation. I would not simply expose Jennifer's deception and walk away. Instead, I would find ways to help everyone involved while ensuring that justice was ultimately served. My first step was to help the Sawyer family without Jennifer's knowledge. Using the address information I had obtained, I called Robert and Linda Sawyer directly, introducing myself as someone interested in purchasing family photographs and memorabilia for an art project I was developing. "We are creating a documentary about working-class families in America," I explained, "and we would like to include authentic family photographs and personal items in our exhibition. We would pay fair market value for anything you would be willing to share." The Sawyers were hesitant at first, not understanding why someone would want to purchase their family photographs. However, when I explained that the project would pay $8,000 for a collection of photos and personal items, their tone changed immediately. $8,000, Linda Sawyer repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "Are you certain? We do not have anything particularly valuable or historic. Authentic family photographs are exactly what we need," I assured her. "The more genuine and personal, the better for our purposes." I arranged to meet them the following day and purchase enough family memorabilia to cover their rent arrears and prevent the foreclosure. They would keep their home without knowing who had actually helped them, and I would gain valuable information about Jennifer's real background that might prove useful later. Next, I turned my attention to the damaged wedding dress. Rather than simply repairing it, I decided to completely transform it, using techniques that would showcase the full extent of my couture expertise. I would redesign it as an elegant evening gown that could serve as a demonstration piece for the Met Gala commission. Working through the night, I deconstructed the existing beadwork and restructured the entire garment. The pearls were rearranged into flowing patterns that emphasized movement and light. The French lace was reshaped into dramatic architectural elements that created stunning visual impact. The silk was cut and resewn to create a silhouette that was both classic and contemporary. The result was a masterpiece that surpassed even my original creation. Every technique I had learned during 30 years of professional work was represented in the finished piece. It was a dress that would stop conversations and command attention, a perfect demonstration of what I was capable of creating when given complete artistic freedom. I also reached out to Catherine Blackwell and asked if she would be willing to attend the wedding with several influential friends. I explained that I planned to wear the transformed dress to the event and would appreciate having knowledgeable witnesses to observe Jennifer's reaction. "I would be delighted to attend," Catherine said. "In fact, I will bring Patricia Hamilton, the celebrity stylist who has been trying to reach you. She is in town this week, and this would be a perfect opportunity for you to meet in person." The pieces of my plan were falling into place. I would attend Jennifer's wedding, wearing the dress she had thrown away, transformed into something that would demonstrate my true capabilities. Catherine and Patricia would be there to witness the event and potentially discuss future collaborations. Marcus would have all the information he needed to make an informed decision about his marriage. Most importantly, Jennifer's parents would be safe in their home, regardless of what happened to their daughter's elaborate deception. The day before the wedding, I received a panicked phone call from Jennifer. Her voice was strained and anxious, completely different from the confident, condescending tone she usually used when speaking to me. "Trina, I need to ask you something," she began hesitantly. "Did you happen to hear anything about someone helping my parents with their rent? They called me yesterday to say that someone had paid off their back rent anonymously, and I cannot figure out who would have done that." I could hear the fear in her voice. Jennifer understood that someone knew about her real background and family situation, which meant her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. "I have no idea," I replied honestly. "Perhaps they had a benefactor they were not aware of, or maybe a charity organization helped them." "Trina," Jennifer continued, her voice becoming smaller and more vulnerable, "I was wondering if I could ask you for a favor. I know I was not very gracious about the dress you made, and I have been thinking that maybe I was too hasty in my judgment. Would it be possible to borrow that dress for the wedding? I have been having trouble finding something appropriate, and I realize now that your work was probably much better than I initially appreciated." The irony was almost overwhelming. After throwing my creation in the garbage and humiliating me in front of her friends, Jennifer was now begging to wear the same dress she had declared suitable only for poor people. "I will bring a dress to the wedding," I told her, choosing my words carefully. "I think you will find it quite suitable for the occasion." I did not specify which dress I would be bringing, or who would be wearing it. The morning of Jennifer's wedding dawned crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight filtering through the trees surrounding the upscale country club she had booked using Marcus credit cards. I spent extra time preparing for the day, knowing that everything I had planned would culminate in the next few hours. I dressed carefully in the transformed wedding gown, which I had redesigned as an elegant evening dress that showcased every aspect of my couture expertise. The garment flowed around me like liquid silk, the hand-sewn pearls catching the light and creating subtle patterns of brilliance with every movement. The French lace had been restructured into dramatic sleeve details that suggested both classic elegance and contemporary sophistication. Looking at myself in the mirror, I realized that this dress represented not just my technical skills, but my journey through decades of professional growth, personal loss, and hard-won wisdom. Every stitch carried the weight of experience. Every bead reflected light that had been earned through years of dedication to my craft. When I arrived at the country club, I could see that Jennifer had spared no expense in creating her fantasy wedding. The venue was decorated with elaborate floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and linens that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Servers in formal attire circulated among guests who were dressed in the kind of expensive clothing that suggested privilege and social status. However, I also noticed signs of the tension that was building beneath the surface of Jennifer's carefully orchestrated event. Her parents, Robert and Linda Sawyer, stood awkwardly near the entrance, clearly uncomfortable in this environment that was so different from their usual social circle. They wore their best clothing, but it was obviously modest compared to the designer outfits worn by Jennifer's pretentious friends. Marcus looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, but I could see stress in his posture and expression. He had clearly been wrestling with the information I had shared with him, and the decision he would need to make about his future was weighing heavily on his mind. Jennifer herself was radiant in an expensive designer gown that she had purchased with money taken from Marcus accounts. The dress was beautiful in a conventional way, but it lacked the personality and craftsmanship that distinguished truly exceptional couture work. She moved through the reception area greeting guests, maintaining her facade of confident sophistication while clearly watching for any signs that her secrets might be exposed. I made my entrance at the moment when most guests had arrived and were mingling before the ceremony began. As I walked through the main doors of the reception hall, conversations gradually stopped as people noticed the extraordinary dress I was wearing. The transformed gown commanded attention in a way that went beyond simple beauty. The intricate beadwork caught the crystal chandelier light and scattered it in tiny rainbows across the silk. The flowing lines of the redesigned silhouette created an effect that was both timeless and modern. Every element worked together to create something that was unmistakably the work of a master craftsman. Catherine Blackwell approached me immediately, followed by Patricia Hamilton and several other guests, who clearly recognized exceptional craftsmanship when they saw it. Patricia, a tall woman with silver hair and keen eyes, examined the dress with the practiced gaze of someone who had worked with the world's best designers. "My goodness, this is extraordinary," Patricia said, circling around me to observe the construction details. "The technique is absolutely flawless. Where did you find something this spectacular?" "I made it," I replied simply, watching as more guests gathered to examine the dress. Word spread quickly through the reception area that the stunning gown had been created by Marcus' mother. Guests began approaching me to ask about my background and experience, many expressing amazement that such talent existed within their social circle without their knowledge. Jennifer, who had been greeting guests near the altar area, noticed the commotion surrounding me and began making her way through the crowd. As she got closer and could see the details of my dress, her face began to change expression. Recognition dawned slowly. Then all at once, Jennifer realized that the dress commanding so much admiration and attention was the same gown she had thrown in the garbage just days earlier. The dress for poor people had been transformed into something that outshone everything else at her expensive wedding. Her face went from confusion to shock to something approaching panic as the full implications hit her. Everyone at her wedding was praising the work of the woman she had humiliated and dismissed. The dress she had declared worthless was now being examined and admired by fashion industry professionals who clearly recognized its superior quality. "Trina." Jennifer approached me, her voice barely above a whisper. "That dress. Is that the same one you showed me the other day?" "Yes," I replied calmly, continuing to respond to questions from other guests about my techniques and experience. I redesigned it after our last conversation. Jennifer's friends, Blair, Courtney, and Madison, gathered around her with confused expressions. They remembered mocking the dress just days earlier, but what they were seeing now was undeniably magnificent. "But you said it was obviously homemade," Blair whispered to Jennifer. "You said it was amateur work that would embarrass her to wear." Jennifer could not respond. She was beginning to understand that she had insulted and rejected someone with genuine talent and professional credentials, someone whose work was being praised by people with actual expertise in fashion and design. The situation became even more complex when James Morrison, Patricia Hamilton's assistant, arrived with legal papers from the Fairmont family's attorney. The documents were a cease and desist order, officially requiring Jennifer to stop using the Fairmont name and threatening legal action for identity theft and fraud. "Miss Jennifer Sawyer," James announced in a voice that carried across the reception area, "you are being served with legal notice to cease and desist all use of the Fairmont family name and identity. Continued impersonation will result in criminal charges for fraud and identity theft." The reception area fell silent as guests processed what they had just witnessed. Jennifer's elaborate facade began crumbling in real time as people realized that her claimed family connections were fraudulent. Marcus, who had been watching the events unfold from across the room, walked over to where Jennifer stood, frozen with shock and humiliation. "Jennifer, we need to talk," he said quietly. "I think our guests deserve an explanation about what is happening here." Jennifer's face had gone completely white. She looked around desperately at the faces surrounding her, all of them now filled with questions and doubt. The wedding she had planned as the culmination of her false identity was instead becoming the moment when all her lies were finally exposed. "I cannot do this," she whispered, then louder. "I cannot do this right now." With that, Jennifer turned and ran from the reception area, leaving behind a room full of confused guests and a groom who was finally seeing his fiancée's true character clearly for the first time. Marcus looked around at the assembled guests, then at me in my stunning transformed gown, then at the legal papers scattered on the floor where Jennifer had dropped them. "I think," he announced to the room, "we need to postpone this celebration indefinitely." In the days that followed Jennifer's dramatic exit from her own wedding, the pieces of her elaborate deception continued to unravel, while the people affected by her lies began the process of healing and moving forward. Jennifer eventually returned to face the consequences of her actions, but not before spending 3 days hiding in a hotel room, using credit cards that were already maxed out to avoid confronting the reality of what her life had become. When she finally emerged, it was to find that Marcus had changed the locks on their apartment and was consulting with an attorney about protecting himself from her debts and potential legal liabilities. The conversation between Jennifer and Marcus, which took place in my living room with me present as a witness, was both heartbreaking and necessary. For the first time in their relationship, Jennifer spoke honestly about her background, her financial situation, and the psychological pressure that had driven her to create such an elaborate false identity. "I was so ashamed of where I came from," she said through tears, her affected speech patterns dropping away to reveal a more authentic voice. "My parents work so hard, but we never had enough money for the things that seemed normal to everyone else. When I got to college and met people who had grown up with privilege, I felt like I had to pretend to be someone else just to fit in." Marcus listened patiently as Jennifer explained how her lies had grown over time, becoming more complex and harder to maintain. She had used student loans not just for education, but to fund a lifestyle that would support her false identity. When she met Marcus, she saw an opportunity to make her deception permanent, but the pressure of maintaining the facade had driven her to increasingly desperate measures. "I never meant to hurt you," she said to Marcus. I thought if I could just keep it going until after the wedding, maybe I could find a way to fix everything without you ever finding out. Marcus, to his credit, showed more compassion than Jennifer probably deserved. I understand why you felt like you needed to lie, he said. But the stealing, the cruelty to my mother, the identity theft, those were choices you made that hurt innocent people. Jennifer also apologized to me, though her words felt more like desperation than genuine remorse. She acknowledged that throwing away the dress had been cruel and vindictive, motivated by her own insecurity and fear of being exposed. I knew the dress was beautiful, she admitted. That was why I was so threatened by it. You represented everything I was pretending to be but could never actually become. While Jennifer worked through the immediate consequences of her actions, I focused on helping the people who had been innocent victims of her deception. Her parents, Robert and Linda Sawyer, were genuinely lovely people who had been kept in the dark about their daughter's problems. When I visited them to explain what had happened, they were devastated to learn about Jennifer's lies, but grateful that someone had helped them keep their home. We always wondered how Jennifer could afford her lifestyle, Linda said, but she told us she had a good job and was doing well. We did not want to pry or make her feel like we doubted her success. I arranged for them to receive ongoing support through connections with legitimate charitable organizations, ensuring that their financial stability would not depend on their daughter's dishonest schemes. They deserved to age with dignity, regardless of the choices Jennifer had made. The Fairmont family, through their attorney, decided not to pursue criminal charges against Jennifer after she agreed to cease all use of their identity and make public corrections to her false claims. They recognized that she was more troubled than malicious, though they maintained the right to take legal action if she violated the agreement. Marcus made the difficult decision to separate from Jennifer until she received professional help for her compulsive lying and spending behaviors. He enrolled in financial counseling to understand how to recover from the debt she had accumulated in his name and to protect himself from future financial manipulation. I still care about her, he told me. But I cannot build a life with someone who is willing to lie about fundamental aspects of who they are. Trust is not something that can be repaired overnight. For my part, I accepted the Met Gala commission from Patricia Hamilton and actress Sarah Chen. The opportunity to return to high-end fashion design at the pinnacle of the industry felt like a vindication of everything I had worked to achieve during my career. The gown I created for Sarah was featured prominently in fashion magazines and led to additional commissions from clients who appreciated my combination of technical skill and artistic vision. More importantly, the events surrounding Jennifer's wedding had reconnected me with the professional network I had missed during retirement. Catherine Blackwell helped me establish a small boutique specializing in couture work for discerning clients who valued craftsmanship over celebrity endorsements. The transformed wedding dress became the centerpiece of my new showroom, displayed with a small placard that read, "Beauty created with love will always find its way back into the light." It served as a reminder to both clients and competitors that true elegance comes from the heart of the creator, not from the price tag or designer label. 6 months later, I received a letter from Jennifer, who had enrolled in therapy and was working at a nonprofit organization that helped people with financial literacy and debt management. She had moved back in with her parents and was slowly paying down her student loans through honest work and careful budgeting. "I am learning to be proud of who I really am," she wrote, "instead of being ashamed of what I am not. My therapist says that accepting help is not the same as admitting failure, and I am trying to believe that." Jennifer asked if I would be willing to teach her some basic sewing techniques, as she had decided to learn practical skills that might help her build a more authentic life. I agreed to meet with her occasionally, understanding that redemption is a process that requires patience and genuine commitment to change. Marcus, meanwhile, had begun dating someone new, a teacher named Sarah who appreciated both his practical nature and his close relationship with his mother. Sarah often joined us for Sunday dinners, where we would share stories and laughter without the underlying tension that had characterized family gatherings during the Jennifer era. I learned something important from that whole experience. Marcus told me one evening as we worked together in my garden. I was so eager to be in love that I ignored signs that something was not right. I thought being supportive meant not asking difficult questions, but real love requires honesty, even when it is uncomfortable. The lesson that emerged from this painful period was more complex than simple good triumphing over evil. Jennifer's deception had caused real harm, but it also revealed the importance of compassion, the power of honesty, and the value of supporting people through their struggles rather than simply punishing their mistakes. I realized that my decision to respond to Jennifer's cruelty with grace rather than revenge had created space for healing that might not have existed otherwise. By choosing to help her parents and focus on my own growth rather than seeking retribution, I had demonstrated the kind of strength that comes from confidence rather than insecurity. The wedding dress that had been thrown away as for poor people had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. It reminded me that our value is not determined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to respond to treatment that is less than we deserve. As I worked in my boutique, creating beautiful garments for clients who appreciated fine craftsmanship, I often thought about the journey that had brought me to this place. The retirement I had planned as a quiet conclusion to my career had instead become a new beginning, filled with opportunities I had never imagined. The lesson I want to share with you is this: never allow someone else's inability to recognize your worth to diminish your belief in yourself. When we respond to cruelty with grace, to rejection with resilience, and to betrayal with compassion, we create the possibility for transformation that extends far beyond our own lives. True elegance is not about the clothes we wear or the status we display, but about the dignity we maintain when facing life's most difficult challenges. When we choose to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm, we become the kind of people who make the world a little more beautiful simply by being in it. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone underestimated your abilities or treated your efforts with disrespect? How did you choose to respond? And what did that experience teach you about your own strength and character? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below, because I believe that sharing our experiences of overcoming adversity helps all of us grow stronger together. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and I hope that my story has reminded you of your own incredible worth and resilience. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded of their own value today. Remember, you are more capable and deserving of respect than you might realize, and your story of triumph is still being written.